Thank you very much. I think it's for the beginning. We have a lot of intense issues to discuss, and I'll try to sum up. So also we're like that you check me if I'm on the same ground with you or somewhere else. And I think to conclude the discussion between Snezhana and Dmitry, I think the most important, like if we talk of the when to archive, what the discussion suggested that there is a moment of rethinking the past, and also opening up to this process of rethink to some generations which are going behind you. So it's one of the moments which is happening, and for example, for the liberating of knowledge, this is what was involved in that. And also listening to the previous talks, the last slides that David suggested to show the other story exhibition plan and how it reconnects to the Other Story archive of Rashid Arayan given to the IJ Art Archive. It also represents us that the moment of time could be kind of coincidence or simultaneousness, which could be a way of thinking. So my suggestion is that we also, and how we deal with this simultaneous coincidence. And I think it opens up two big strains. So one is, has the archives to be coordinated? Because as I looked at your both faces, you didn't know about that, for example, there is a map of Other Story presented on the site of After All. There was a real surprise, and even to us, though we were preparing with Valentin. We don't know exactly this part of the, I knew that you're preparing a book, but that it exists already and accessible digitally. And on the other hand, this question is if this work has to be done, or this simultaneously has to be uncontrolled. And if, for example, I don't know, you will reply, if this, and if the control should be, if it has to be controlled by an artist, so there is this will, which is like a signature, which could be a very subjective will. So I say that it is like that. And I, like Vladislav presented yesterday, so there is an artist research-based project, and I can say that this is my art. Or this control has to be more mediated, like David presented in the frocking that he coordinates the system of memory, how it's done, and he retells the story, but there is always his way of being behind the story. It's more accurate. And I think, or whether an institution can be an artist sometime, like Emilie presented to us. So first, has simultaneous thinking has to be controlled or not? Please reply. I don't know.
Oh, you go first. Okay. I mean, on this Other Story thing is an interesting. Well, I mean, the boring answer to that is it's been launched softly, but not. You know this term, it was a soft launch, so no one really knows about this project, I think, at the moment. So I don't know if I was supposed to share it, but I thought it might be interesting. I think it's very much in a kind of beta or developmental stage, and it's trying to be developed more, so that's perhaps why it's not so accessible. But I think, I mean, more to your other point, I definitely agree that the image of an archive is not a kind of collection, or I mean, it shouldn't be, it's much more of a network, and this is what I've learned through working with archives. You know, it's dispersed, it's incomplete. And also something that I didn't mention is that this idea of people as archives as well, which has come up very, very clearly from the Chiang Mai research. You know, we're very reliant on oral history there, and so you see in the work that you're doing as well, the kind of necessity to tap into those archives that are kind of just walking around, or storing things in another way.
Yeah, I think so. My surprise was more kind of like a joy, because as an archivist, there's nothing better than seeing that someone is actually using the collection. I think that's the thing for us when I was talking about activation.
It's not Lucy isn't using your...
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Yeah. So what is Kate saying? That what also is a surprise for me, that they're not using your collection. It was whether it was taken separately from Rashid.
Oh, I'm not sure.
I can tell you from...
Oh, do you know?
Yeah.
We have the backstory.
So Lucy
Kate is
Steeds,
behind that.
Lucy Steeds, as a member of After All, prepared a keynote paper for a conference that was based on basically it's Black Artists and Modernism conference that was based on The Other Story. And in preparation for that, whilst also simultaneously working with the students and the researchers to do what would hope to be a website, she approached a number of different places, including Rashid, because it is an open source network, and the Hayward Gallery archives, and a number of artists, including Sonia Boyce, who is running the Black Artists and Modernism series of conferences. So it's literally, it's simultaneity rather than usage.
Again, either way, for me as an archivist, it's just so good to see people using it and see archives actually being out there in the public space. I think that's the kind of real joy for us, and that's something that we, as I said, in our activation is what we really want. We want people to be citing our collections, we want people to be able to take them away and to reuse them and to do stuff like that. So I think, you know, any opportunity for people to access archives and do creative things with them or have them in essays and things is really what we do as an organisation. To go back to the question regarding the kind of structuring or how the mediation with the artists, it's a really interesting one because quite often, you know, archives are very, very structured. You know, they're a series of, like a logical series and sub-series and folders and subfolders. And sometimes that can just drive artists crazy. It just doesn't fit with how they think and how they see the world. And so, you know, with Frog King, that was quite a long mediation to get that arranged. And it actually, I think it must have gone through 3 or 4 different arrangement and descriptions before we got to one where we were comfortable with how it was actually set out. And so sometimes it's you know, there's a lot of discussion. Other times, you know, there's a lot less. They're just like, take the material, do what you want with it. I'm on to the next thing. So.
And Emilie, for example, when you made this retrospective posters, have you confirmed with an artist how the exhibition looks like, or it was like only institutional choice? And if there were some, I don't know, like sexy graphic design was the criteria, or what was that? Because it's really kind of really big choice that you make.
Yeah, it works, yeah. Yeah, of course it was done in consultation with the artists. The design is kind of a systematic design and it's more image-based, basically, but it was nice in a way as we try to have this long-term relationship with artists and, you know, through the residency really tightens that relationship. It's nice also to go back to them and to say like, you know, 5-7 years later, your exhibition, how do you want to remember it now also? So it was actually a nice process. And I just wanted to say something because how we've been working so much with artists actually who do work with archives. So and revisiting exhibition history, etc. And today I feel also in what I was trying to describe as like immediately archiving. For me, it's almost an overload of information because I think we're so much into image producing, especially with like social media and like everything being online, that we're almost in an anxiety to produce, you know, archive when I feel it's for me there's anxiety related to archive in any case, but like here it's almost like anticipating, you know, the fact that you don't want things to disappear. There's this kind of self-consciousness, which was a bit what I was trying to address. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So is there a question? Yes, so there is a question from Claudia. Can you please pass?
I have a question for David Smith. David, I was a little struck by you saying that you fact check. You check the facts, like if an artist tells you a story, because artists are known to invent their own narratives and their own subjectivities. And I understood that you said that you check the facts. And how do you do that? I mean, it sounds very journalistic, not artistic to me.
Or maybe that was a bit kind of overemphasized, but So for us, and I guess for the wider kind of traditional archive interpretation, it's looking for evidence of actions. That's what archives capture. And so one of the things that we need to think about is that we need to make sure that the information that we're capturing is to a degree accurate. Because of course, if you think forward maybe 10, 50, 100 years, someone doing research and there's incorrect information, this is in the metadata, then that can be an issue, and that could cause trouble. So with Frog King, as you saw in the picture, he had a book. So he's created his own book, and so he was going through and reading it. And all we did, my colleague Elaine, basically just went through the same book and just went through and just made sure that it was matching up to what was being said. So yeah, I wouldn't say that we're going through and cleaning it as such. We're just making sure that it's got parity to the sources, the kind of sources that we're referring to.
Yeah, could you please?
It's interesting with this panel, the fact that you are all small-scale organizations. And so you have a certain number of resources, and you all mentioned that. And as a consequence, all of you have chosen a path that I think is more to do with a kind of subjectivity, whether it's the subjectivity of picking a particular aspect to archive. You're not doing India and China and and it can go down to an exhibition or to think through how to, basically all three of you are thinking about how to interpret what an archive is. I would say that there is still a subjectivity even trying to find the dates, because sometimes you just can't. I mean, that's the problems we have here. So if you think about the subjectivity that you or the people that you're commissioning and working with are bringing to the archive, what, in your perspective, is this subjectivity that is different to the way that an artist, because none of you are working with artists to do this, you're all working with archives from artists or from exhibitions or from artworks you sometimes do it after all. So what's the difference between the subjectivity that you or your researchers are bringing to these kind of interpretations of the archive versus the way that an artist does it, do you think?
I mean, for me, I don't think we would pretend to a kind of objectivity. I wouldn't be that comfortable talking about trying to present an objective history of these fairly messy kind of events. I think what I was trying to convey in the sort of last few remarks that I made was that I think it is a process of following artists to a great degree as well. I think what I find a bit of a turn-off about an art historical approach is it's not it doesn't follow artists to the extent that maybe a more curatorial approach might. I feel perhaps slightly more sympathetic to that way of trying to understand what these projects are. Although, I'm a bit allergic to the word curatorial as well. I think. I wouldn't see objectivity as a kind of horizon of something to be aiming for in this case, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, maybe just a remark. I think it's definitely all very subjective also because it's so much related to people, which is also something that came out yesterday. And in our case, actually, the founders are still around. I've been working personally in the institution for a long time, so everything you have this archive, but it also goes very much through word to mouth and still. So it's really still also quite, in a way, oral history. So I think basically there's no distance at all, and that a shift or maybe really where an archive appears is when there is some kind of, rupture, basically, so that someone else looks at it, and as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think we are quite subjective in our approach. So I think we're quite clear, what we're interested in. We're not like, say, a government archive where the material is transferred in, it's arranged and described, and it's put there, and to a certain degree it's neutral until someone looks at it and interprets it. I don't think we really do that. I think we have specific things that we've highlighted that we would like to make available, and then we go and find those things and make them available. I'm not sure if I'm really answering your question. Sorry? Which kind? In what sense?
What is your checklist?
Checklist in terms of...
You mean content priorities, which David showed, or you mean... I think the question of Claudia also had the same, is you name the content priorities. Sure. So the areas of knowledge or areas of art process which we are interested in. But we are interested how they appear. You mentioned, for example, that women in art appeared just recently. So is it like a group decision?
Oh, okay.
And also I think Kate's question was very interesting, like what is the difference between the subjectivity of an artist and subjectivity of organizations? As far as I get it, Emilie says that there is no difference between the kind of all live together in a process. And but if you can comment on Asia's art archive.
Okay. Yeah, so the organizational priorities evolve. So they come out of the research that we're doing, and we're looking for areas that we see are maybe not as represented in the kind of wider art historical narrative. So, for example, over the last, for probably since 2000, we've been doing a lot of work in China. So big collections of material on development of art in 1980s, lots of material in 1990s, and kind of looking at those collections and thinking about them, and then kind of looking at the collections that we have, and they're very male focused. So then we kind of ask, well, who are the female artists? Where are they? Where are these collections? And then from that discussion, we've just made one collection available from Jonah Cohen, which has photographic documentation of, say, female artists in China. So it's kind of looking at ourselves to an extent of what we do have and don't have, really, and that can change it. So another example, I guess, was performance art. It's something that we've been looking at for a long time, and we have a really, really good collection, again, relating back to Chiang Mai from Ray Langenbach, who's an artist, educator, and a performance artist, also a documenter of performance art. So we have quite a nice collection of performance art of Southeast Asia. But what we were worried about is that, well, is that now shaping people's research into performance art about Southeast Asia? So we're now developing, we're developing a collection of performance art in South Asia, and also looking at what's going on in China as well. So it kind of evolves slowly, and we kind of look at each other.
To link that, I mean, from what I understood from your question as well, I think what really helps in this kind of collective, subjective, institutional approach is it allows you to cut across those categories. So, you don't have to do India or do China, because you can find other trajectories and kind of transversal connections that actually allow for much more interesting and, I don't know, forward-thinking ways of interpreting these histories. Oh dear, it's not. I take it back. It's not curatorial.
So are there any other questions? Because I have one, but maybe somebody else want to join. Okay, so there is no question. So I had one question which relates to one of the projects that we did here at Garage Archive, and also relates, for example, to a representation of research that Lucas did yesterday, which I think everybody was amazed by, and which is done in the area of architecture-related research, where there is a three-dimensionality of architects involved in presenting the data and make this data accessible right away. And it also deals with the subjectivity, how far, I don't know, you neglect or you support or you feel accurate regarding employing some other tools, for example, like whether it's like more architectural way of structuring the research, or we once used sociological when we were trying to re-establish the family tree of Russian contemporary art based on sociological aspect of how many times each artist referenced another artist. And it was very much criticized afterwards by the artists because they didn't find this sociological aspect valid. So, I mean, how do you feel regarding some other data variants of involvement into the archive research? It's like everybody was like, I mean, does it work, or you never thought about it, or you think it's a choice of an artist and maybe to use it or not to use it?
It sounds like it could be sort of interesting to me, but I mean, I can see why. You don't want to start writing the biography. Like, in a way, it's meaningless that these people knew each other, if that's what you were talking about. But in a way, you can track certain. You can track certain other. It maybe opens up other possibilities for understanding the situation. I mean, I think it's often about power relations, right? So I think part of the reason you produce a history in the way you do is because you're contesting the dominant form of how that history is told. So, for example, what Lukasz, what you were both saying about making Europe disappear, I think we can all agree on that, and it comes from this kind of impetus, I guess.
Okay, do you want to add something? Because I was shown that there is 0 minute and we can finish up at the Europe disappearance. So it's like really ambitious.
Yeah.
Claudio, do you have a comment? To this, you make Europe relevant, I hope. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.